All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be a stellar podcast today. Right before we get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. You can reach out to VetLife through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce the guest I have with me today, Carol Sue Reeder, judge, lawyer. There's so many titles that could describe this woman, and there's so many things that she's accomplished in her life. And right before I put her on camera, I want to give a quick story that actually I was speaking at a veterans court, and she quoted from the song Imagine by John Lennon, and it made a very strong impression on me because, as the listeners know, I walked out to my pro debut to the song Imagine. So I knew right away, I was like, at one point I'd love to get to know that woman more. I'd love to speak to her, and I'm sure that we have a lot of similarities. So Carol, without stealing all your thunder here, I want to take this all the way back to start this podcast. Were you born and raised here in Michigan? What were you like as a young woman? What was your family like? What did you think you were going to be in this lifetime? And then, let's start to build your story into adulthood.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised here. Grew up on a farm. My dad didn't have any boys, so I took the place of a son. Just did all the farm work, milk cows before I went to school, and helped with the haying and all of that stuff in the summer. Just a regular farm kid, tomboy. Played a lot in the trees and a lot of things in nature. I had a horse that was very hard to control. She didn't like to be reined in, and of course my dad didn't help because he'd put a bucket of grain out for her when I was riding, and so she'd come running back to the barn with me on it. Anyway, so lived on the farm until I was 18, and I went to Michigan State right out of high school.
Would you say you had a really good home life? Like you had a strong family unit where mom and dad, you come from a strong background, they had good careers, or was it kind of rocky early on? I find that kind of shapes people a lot and like who they are based on their childhood.
Yeah. Well, my mother was very difficult, and my sister left home when she was about 16 to get away from her. Very verbally abusive, that kind of thing. So I was my dad's daughter. Spent a lot of time in the barn away from mom. But as I got older, I realized that she just never had achieved her dreams. She wanted to be an artist, and she never got the chance to really go to school or do what she wanted to. So she would, say things to me like, I wish you'd never been born, because if you hadn't been born, I could do what I wanted to do. Well, after a while, when you get off into other things like school, and you get told that that's not the truth, you begin to sort things out. So that's what happened to me. I never missed a day of school because that's where I love to be. I was in National Honor Society throughout high school. Also hung out with the Future Farmers of America, and I was in 4-H. So it was well balanced, I think. And, I've always seen people as people, and I think you learn that growing up on the farm because you deal with animals. And animals teach you a lot. So I got a lot of my compassion for things from being on the farm.
Animals have a certain, unconditional love that people aspire to have. A lot of people speak about it. There's, texts about it in religion, that unconditional love, but it's very rarely given and very rarely received.
Right.
But I think you're absolutely right. You learn so much about how to love unconditionally by working with animals.
You do, and thank God I had a father who just let me go. He just said, you want to try it? Just try it. And if it doesn't work out, you're going to know. So if you want to go climb a tree, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. And when you fall out, I'll be there. And that's the way it was. And
I feel like that was a very common theme back in the day. It's like you kind of let people learn, by touching the thing that was hot to go, ooh, that's hot, I shouldn't touch that, you know? And
right.
nowadays I feel like there's so many people that are trying to control everything that you're actually probably setting people up for failure more, because when you fall out of the tree, you learn a lesson.
You
You
do.
go, oh, wait, I can fall. I can get injured. My actions can have repercussions. I have to think about my decisions in advance. So it does definitely help shape you.
I can fail.
I can fail. So now
It's
you said something extremely profound where you were able to rearrange in your mind that relationship with your mother. You went, wait a second, what it actually was this was a woman that never pursued her passions, that is getting older, that had failures within her own mind and was pointing blame at other things, when really, like, regardless of whether you have children or not, you can still pursue your dreams. Regardless of whether you're poor or you're rich, you can pursue your dreams. But you found a way to reshape that. Now, that probably didn't happen in childhood, but that probably happened with life experience.
Yeah.
You know, when did you start to be able to reform that relationship? And then also, when you were in college, what were you going to school to be? Like, what was your focus on initially?
It's interesting because I went to Michigan State only for 2 semesters. My grandfather paid for me to go, and then he couldn't afford it anymore. My parents said, we're not paying for college. Nobody should go to college. You should just live next door to where you work.
We could build you a spot on the farm right over there.
Right. And, as long as you can do hard work, it's okay with us. But that also taught me not to look at myself as just a female, because I did the work of a man. And it gave me good work ethic. So I carried that with me, but I dropped out of Michigan State and went to work as a secretary. Found out pretty quick what that kind of life was, and I didn't want that. So I always wanted to go back to school. Went to airline school to learn how to be a reservationist. Never did get employed that way. But, and then I fell in love and had my daughter, and so your path changes with that. And then I became a single mom, and I became a single mom because he was abusive to me, and my parents loved him and sided with him over me. So it was pretty rough, but I was always going to do what was right for my daughter, and never have regretted that. I never kept him from seeing her or his parents, and she's very close with that family because of that. And I don't let that get me down. I just went to work in a factory. So I was a flush lever inspector for Chrome for 3 years because that's what paid the bills. Got myself a little Mustang. So I was doing fine. And then I got married again, met my second husband at that factory. He was a salesman. And we were married for 11 years, and I have a son that is his son. And I always wanted to go back to school, but he never thought we had the money to do that. So I just kept working at different jobs. I ended up working in the prosecutor's office after I worked for an attorney for a while. And I liked that. I went in there on I went back to U of M about that time. I think it was around 74. And I did an independent study, studying how many black people got arrested in Livingston County and were they treated differently than whites. Right away I found out the prosecutor's office didn't keep track of any of those statistics, and neither did the sheriff's department. So I spent a lot of time going through index cards. And it took me about 1.5 years to finish the study. And the study ended up showing there were no black people in Livingston County to go to jail. And nobody was coming anywhere from out of the city to commit crime here, which is kind of what it says for the county at that time. And after that, of course, we got the Ku Klux Klan and all this other stuff. Mitzi, stop.
You said Ku Klux Klan, and she said, I'll take them out. Don't even mess around. You see that? She got fired up.
That's all right.
She said, you're not welcome here.
And she should. But anyway, then I really liked my job at the prosecutor's office, and I worked for Judge Del Vero for 9 years. During that time, he let me basically begin to run the office. So I developed a victim witness program so that victims were talked to about their cases. And I also redid his whole statistic system, put in a computer and all that stuff. I was looking for ways to make things better. And he let me form a scan team, which was like a wraparound service that helped kids who had been victims of child abuse. And I got to help prepare them for court so they weren't so scared when they went into the courtroom. And I then became very interested at the fact that I was getting a lot of people in, because I was like the front person. Nobody else wanted to do that, deal with the people coming off the street and all their problems. But there was no place for people of abuse to be housed, and they were being transported out of the county with their kids, very disruptive. So I and 2 other people got together, and we formed La Casa.
You formed La Casa?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was in 79, 80. And we started with $100 to pay for a phone. And then we had people who would volunteer their houses to keep basically women in. But I always thought it was men, too. You know, I would have people come in that were men that were abused, but they never wanted to do anything because of being ashamed of it. So I got a good idea of what all that was about. And because I had been a victim myself, I understood how to deal with that. And I worked at that for about 9 years. And then I decided, I saw a lot of attorneys come and go as prosecutors. And I thought to myself, I think I can do a better job than that, because I feel more for people. So I decided I needed to know more about civil law. So I went to work for Tom Kaiser, and I worked for him for 3 years learning how to do divorce cases. And then after that I worked for Susan Reck and David Reck. She became a judge, so I had to find another place to go. And Judge Pickerainen took me under his wing, as I had finished my undergrad at that time and thought, maybe law school. So I was his clerk for 5 years while I was in law school. Interesting job. I finally found out a lot more about the law from being behind the bench than, working in an office. So when I went to law school, it was interesting because I kept saying, well, that's not the way it's done. You know, you may be teaching me theory, but in practice, this isn't what we do. So it was a little difficult to make that adjustment, but I did. Never had any ambitions to become a judge. Never really had ambitions to be an attorney until it was in situational. And the calling came. So then I was a public defender after I got my license for 15 years. And I enjoyed that. Helped a lot of people, try and get counseling for them and that kind of thing. And then came down to the fact that the people that were running for the judgeship that Judge Pickerainen was vacating ended up being a husband-wife team, because she was already a judge and her husband wanted to run and be a judge. And I thought that would be a problem. And I also knew that if that happened because of what was going on, I would no longer be a public defender. So I decided, I'll run. Let's just see, And that's what I did. And it took me 3 years to accept the fact that I'd won.
I want to talk about a couple parts of your story right
Okay.
now. So confidence is just prevalent in your entire story. And I think it goes all the way back to being that young woman on the farm that was like, hey, if I can bust my butt out here and do all these things and have this work ethic and do stuff that you probably don't want to do, or it's difficult, or some days you're just tired, you get back up, you do it anyway. You learn discipline, right? And
Sure.
discipline then improves your self-esteem, improves your confidence, improves like, if I can do that, I can definitely do what you're doing. You know what I mean? You try to come to the farm and do what I'm doing. I
Right.
doubt you can make it.
Right.
So confidence is super prevalent throughout your story. And do you think that was a huge factor into, like, because when I work with a lot of struggling youth, and when I see these kids, so many of them lack that just basic principle within themselves of being confident. Do you think that was a crucial aspect? Because you're like, oh, I'll go to law school. Oh, I'll do this. I guess I'll go to Michigan State. Then I'll go back to U of M. And you know what? I'm going to run for judge. And, oh, they need a public defender, and this person's not doing it. I'm going to do that. Like, you've had this strong sense of, like, I can impact the world from a young age. Would you say that confidence was a crucial aspect of that, Carol? Or what has led you to be able to, like, it seems like every time you have an idea or a vision, you just make it happen.
I think that's how everything happens. If you want something hard enough, you're going to do it. And I've told people that from the bench. I said, you know, you're standing 10 feet from me. The only difference between me and you is 10 feet and a bad decision. You can do
Wow.
what I did. You've got to want it. If you want it, you will make it happen.
So personal responsibility to your goals, to
Right.
the things that you want. And it's like we all have a sad story. We all have ups and downs. We all have things. But from every moment you wake up, you can choose to be the person that continues those actions, or you can be the person that says, you know what? I've learned from these mistakes. I've learned from these problems. I've seen the chaos that my actions can cause.
Right.
I'm going to be a different human being now. So you can see that. And the ability for you, because I could tell right before we even spoke on the podcast, you were like, we're just people. Like I have, it's painted on the wall out there. We are all one.
We are.
It's painted on the wall. So you're able to take yourself out and see just another human being, regardless of race, belief system, social status, money. You see another human and you go, hey, if I have potential, you have potential.
That's right.
So honestly, you said something else that I thought was outstanding where you're like, I never really wanted to be a judge. Those are the people that we need as judges, not someone that wants an authority over people or that someone that wants to enforce power. Someone that is a compassionate human being that's trying to say, hey, how do we... justice is real and it should be real, right? Like, so when you mess up, there should be repercussions. Otherwise, you know, that our society would probably collapse.
Right.
But we need people like that are taking these very difficult roles in society.
Well, I always tried never to shame anyone. You know, yeah, you come in and you've got a problem and you've made a mistake, or, you know, you've got a drug addiction.
Come here, Mitzi.
Missy, come here. Come here.
She hears the people
Come here,
outside
baby.
the door coming in. Come here, girl.
Come on. Come here. Mitzi, come here. Come here. Come up here. Mitzi. No, it's
The
okay.
pup is on her guard game. She
Yeah.
heard people outside of the door coming in for class, and she said, wait a second.
I lost my ear.
I can just...
Anyway, where were we?
You were talking about you were always able to see yourself as those people, you know,
Yeah.
even though you're only 10
Oh, yeah.
feet apart and you're only, you know,
Right.
just across a bench. You're trying to show people that, like, hey,
Right.
we're the same.
I liked it when they would come in and they were young and they'd say, well, I can't finish school. I have to work. I said, well, I worked and went to school. You can too. You just have to understand that it's going to be hard, but you do it. I said, I went back to school when I had 2 kids.
So you're able, and you said something else, that you said, I don't shame people. Because a lot of society, as soon as you dub someone a loser, as soon as you tell somebody they're not worthy, if that gets into their psychology, they're going to live like someone that's a loser, there's someone that's not worthy. We have to work to fix people and,
Right.
you know, and try to show people that, like, hey, just as much as you might be on this path right now, there is a potential for you to get back on the right path and turn your life around.
That's true. And people who come into the court, they're at a low point. And like I said, you know, you're already on the floor. You can't fall off any further. It's the professionals that come in that take the biggest fall, you know, and always wanted to be treated differently because they are, in their estimations, higher up than anyone else. I never saw that. So I think they were pretty disappointed that they got treated like everybody else.
Yeah,
But
time out. You're just still a person. You
That's
might
right.
put on your pants a certain way, or you might have a different title that you call yourself.
Yeah.
But to anyone else, if you remove all that, you remove the job title, you remove your accomplishments and your credentials, you're a human being.
Right.
You know what I mean? And when you're treated as such, it might, if it knocks you down, you need to look at your ego and say, why do I not think I'm just a human being like these other people? Why should I not be held responsible? One of the things I want to talk about is
Sure.
I grew up really loving this country, like loving the American spirit. Like I bought into the fullest. I learned all my rights. I know my amendments. I know the Bill of Rights. I remember being extremely proud to be an American. Now, but I also see people, like I've traveled all over the world. I've been to China multiple times, Brazil, Japan, all over, Finland, Ireland. And Carols and Jameses exist in different places. They're just called a different name,
That's right.
But with that being said, I grew up very, very proud of my country. And, I grew up with the belief that, like, the justice system would, as long as that you were telling the truth and things were right, like, it would work out in your favor. And then as I got a little bit older, I saw, what our justice system can be. And a lot of the times I was really disappointed. And as a young kid, especially in my early 20s, like it almost made me mad because I'm like, that's not how it should be.
Right.
Like it should be whatever is right. Facts should matter. It should be, as someone that has literally devoted their life, a large portion of your life to this system, how have you seen it changed over time? And like, what do you think, people can do to at least keep moving our society in a way that we keep the justice system intact? Because it seems like as time has gone by, it's gotten less and less about justice and more about, connections and money. And like there was just a huge case that happened with Teresa Brennan, which we won't even go into, but like there's corruption is spilling over into a lot of the systems that literally are the integrity of the nation, So as someone that was been in the court for so long, is it as bad as maybe I might think it is on the outside, or are there just certain examples? Just you can speak freely upon that topic as much as you'd like.
Well, there's bad apples in every bunch. But now, because of social media and all of the exposure, you get the news as it's happening. Where years ago this still went on, and it wasn't publicized as much. So the impact now is because of the exposure, and we get to know these things right away.
So would that exposure be a good thing then, because people are being held more accountable, would you say?
It can go two ways. I think it's create a lot of divided opinions, and people have dug their feet in on both sides instead of coming together. And I mean, I listened to a couple of cases recently where the judge said, I know what the law is. I have my opinion, and you have yours, but I have to put my opinion aside and judge what you're bringing me according to what the law requires me to do. So when you accept that kind of analysis, when you're thrown into other situations that don't use that, it becomes very clear quite quickly that unless you are willing to compromise, we're always going to be divided. So there always has to be a middle. I think, most attorneys will say, there's the truth that you see, and there's the truth that the other person sees, but the real truth is somewhere in the middle. So I've always tried to bring that, and I do mediations now, and I still want to bring those people together to find out what can we do to achieve your goal and your goal, but you're still going to have to give something up. And I'd like to see more of that. More of that.
Across all platforms or
Yes.
all levels of society, without a doubt.
Right. So, now I just see so many groups separating themselves into one faction or another and not really seeing the other person. And that's, they have a saying that, you can get black robe disease. And that just means that, you think you're so high and mighty because you've got this robe around your shoulders. Well, an old prosecutor that was in Detroit for a long time that came out to Livingston County once said to me when I was office manager, he says, "You see all these files? These aren't files, these are people." So if you go on to law school, remember that. You may have a file in front of you, but that is a person, and you are affecting their life.
Wow. That is a powerful person.
Yeah.
I mean, those type of people are the people we need.
Yeah.
We need the people that are saying, hey, don't just look at that as a piece of paper. Your decision in this can alter the course of that person's life, their family's life, possibly their children's life. That is a human being. That's powerful right there.
Well, think about your life and what you've gone through and how other people have shaped yours by making decisions for you.
100%. Now, you were a public defender, which is, I mean, that's another aspect that as a civilian that is outside of the court system, I've always looked at the public defenders as like we should be offering a much better level overall because, I mean, it's usually the poor people or the people that are falling on the hardest times or the people that, you know, they just can't afford that representation.
Right.
That if they get a public defender that really does not put any effort forth or like just makes it, I mean, they're friends with the people at the court and they just make a deal in the court's favor to slap this person with another thing that's just going to hold them back further. It's really difficult because if you're rich, okay, you can afford the best attorney with the best connections, with the best legal team, and you're probably going to get the best result or
Not
far
necessarily.
more often than a.
I disagree.
Well, you're probably correct here and I'm probably wrong. But,
I
but
disagree.
as a public defender, would you say that you, over time, has it gotten worse? Like now, the public defender that someone would get assigned in Livingston County, if they're completely poor, they have nothing going for them, is it the same caliber as when you were a public defender? Because maybe I'm only looking at like the current state of society, and I think our public defenders need to be, honestly, like, I don't know if it's much higher level or a lower workload. Maybe they're overwhelmed, but I know friends that have very, very little that have gone, and it just seems like the representation that they get is such low caliber, you know, but you being a compassionate person that is trying to help all human beings, I'm sure that you took it like, I'm going to give 100% to these people because they deserve it. Well,
and you learn how to analyze cases fairly quickly. What are you going to accomplish? Where some of these high-profile attorneys, I mean, they have to make a living, and maybe they file a little bit too many things, but it's seen by the person who is being represented as being the right thing to do, where maybe it isn't. You know, that's why you're called a counselor at law. You're not supposed to do just what your client wants. You're supposed to tell your client, you can do what you want, but I'm going to give you advice as to what I see, and, you know, the choice is yours. But will I fight for you? Sure, I certainly will. And I don't care if you're guilty or not. It's what can we prove in court. So it becomes a difficult position if you really don't believe in your client.
That's what I was about to say. Something I've always wondered about a lawyer is like, I could not, I mean, I know it's the job, but if I knew someone was guilty, especially of like a serious crime, I would not be able to represent them because I'd be like, no, you did the crime, so there's going to be repercussions for it. But as a counselor of the law, that's a good way to look at it. I never really considered it that way. You're just trying to show them exactly how the law is operating, give them their best options based on your knowledge, and being like, hey, here's the path that I would recommend. But at the end of the day, it's your choice what you'd like to do. You know, was it ever difficult, especially, I don't know if you ever had any like murder cases or anything really severe. If you know someone's guilty, isn't it difficult? Or you know what, they're entitled to the same rights that they should receive. How did you juggle that? Because I can tell you're an extremely compassionate person that lives from the heart. And I just couldn't imagine working with someone that I knew was guilty, but I had to like.
How do you know it?
I mean, do they tell you?
How do you know it?
But did they tell you? What if they admitted it to you? Like, yeah, I did this.
I don't know of many people that will admit that they did something. Okay.
Got it.
But when you're representing them, they're innocent. They are innocent until proven guilty. So, do they have a case or not? That's your job. And I always felt that way about people who came in and who were accused. You know, I've had cops that were accused of beating up their wives and things like that. A lot of high-profile cases, and I said, he's innocent. until proven guilty. He's going to be treated like that, and you're not going to make a big circus in my courtroom.
That's amazing, because that is a foundation of this country. Innocent until proven guilty. But in social media, if you watch that, that's not how it is anymore. Now, if there's any speculation for anything, it is you are 100% guilty, burn that person to the ground, ask them to resign, trash their family and name permanently. And then it comes out later that it was a false allegation, and you have this person that has received all that damage.
Isn't that what we did in Salem with the witch hunts?
100%. But it's like we're supposed to learn from history. We're supposed to look at that and go, oh my God, how ridiculous were people back then to just be, burning these people alive out of fears and out of what they made, these stories they created in their mind. Like we're supposed to be better. And you know what? In 100 years, they'll probably look back at us and go, can you believe they did these things?
That's right.
And that's in a weird way almost the beauty of this roller coaster that is life,
Yeah, it does repeat itself.
100%. So I think that's another extremely strong foundation. We need to get back to that. Like, there's a certain love or compassion in innocent until proven guilty. Mm-hmm. You're like giving someone what they deserve. Hey, we're going to give you the opportunity to hear your case out. We're going to give you legal counsel. We're going to allow you to go and, be a part of this system that has been provided to you by laws of the land.
Right.
And if it turns out that you're guilty in the end, at least you had a fair trial. Mm-hmm. You had the opportunity, and it was your choices that led you to this point,
And you want your attorney to want you to have a fair trial. So it doesn't matter if the attorney thinks you're guilty or not. It's what they can prove in court. And if the person is totally innocent, I know how I would feel. I'd want somebody to champion me and not look at me and say, well, she must have done it. She got charged. It's a whole different system.
You just said it so well, because that'd be a very cynical approach. You know what? If they're here, they must have done it. You would give them 10% of what you really could versus fighting for people going, you know what? Innocent until proven guilty. I'm going to do everything in my power to save this family, to save this person, to get them back on track. Because one of the other things about this society that kind of upsets me, because I've traveled so much, like in Finland, they work to rehabilitate their people. Their jails are almost not, they were driving me around the country. I stayed with a couple families over there while I was teaching jiu-jitsu, and they were like, yeah, we work to rehabilitate our people to get them back into healthy, functioning people of society. And here we have private prison populations. We have...
Well, it's not like it used to be. It has changed.
It's gotten better?
It has gotten better.
So it went really bad, and now
it was always a choice. Are you going to go to jail or not? There wasn't, we're going to send you to get counseling. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're not going to address your drug problem. We're just going to put you in jail. I didn't like that. So I fought for years to get a mental health court before I became a judge. And I wanted to do that because I just saw sick people in jail. And they shouldn't be there. They should be getting treatment.
That's that compassion again. You would look at people, you can't help it. And you're going, that is a person struggling with drug abuse, or a person that maybe grew up and dealt with some extreme physical or mental abuse or sexual abuse as a child. And now, if we just throw them in a 6x8 cell and say, hey, that's where you belong, that's a damaged person that maybe we could get them back on their feet to have a beautiful life, to one day help other people, because our effects have ripples.
Okay. But when I first came in as an attorney, that was the philosophy. It was, they just go to jail. And that's not how you fix people. And if you don't want to have recidivism, you've got to do something about that.
Man, so you're seeing these problems from the inside, and you have that compassion in your heart, and you just started taking initiative, saying, listen, we need to change things. Because you said, I know you were a big part of the foundation of the Veterans Court. You were pushing for the mental health court. Let's talk about some of the things that once you got in the system, that spirit you had said, you know what, we got to work for things, because we need to learn from this. Because I agree 100% that so many people, I would say the large majority of people that end up within the court system are just damaged people. They're people that maybe never had good role models or a family, or they've been abused their whole lives. So of course they're going to end up there. They're at their low point, like you said earlier in the podcast. These people are at their rock bottom. But I've been at a rock bottom, and luckily it wasn't at court. My mother committed suicide, and I was at a rock bottom. And then that's what built me into the man that I am today. And that's why I'm successful. And so I have a beautiful family, and I have an academy and people I love in my life, because I went from my bottom. People gave me a chance still, and I built back up. So I look at other people and go, we need to help people do that.
And you wanted it. There was something inside of you that said, I want to be different. If you don't have that burning desire, you won't change your life. Now, I have 2 children. My daughter is a biochemist. She has a PhD in biochemistry. I'm very proud of her. I have a son who is habitual fifth, I think, and is mentally ill, lives on the streets in L.A., homeless. Won't take his meds. Can't help him.
How hard is that to get to a point? Because I don't have children yet, but I plan to. I couldn't, I would die for my dog. I know that sounds silly to a lot of people that are not animal people, but I just have that strong feelings for something that I've been a part of its life. A child is probably 100 times that feeling.
Of course it is.
So and you have a daughter that has just absolutely crushed it and worked through this system, and then a son that has struggled on, you're able to see the spectrum of life, I guess I don't even want to dig into that too much, because I'm sure it's a really difficult thing, but it just basically allows you to see how mental health can affect people, and how it can take them down places that they don't belong in. And it probably gives you even more compassion for the people that when you sat across the bench from them and said, this is a person that needs help, and maybe I can be an influence in getting them that help. So let's talk about some of the things that you initiated, some of the things that you were pushing for, maybe resistance that you ran into, or your big successes. I didn't even know you founded La Casa. we did a charity seminar here for La Casa where everybody could come in and train with some of our best instructors, and we got hundreds of gifts. I have pictures of we filled that entire front room, and we just took truckloads and we just dropped it off at La Casa, and they were like, what is this for? And we're like, we just wanted to support a good thing in the community. Right. Now, I'll show it to you after, but they were like, oh my, thank you so much. It was right before Christmas, and because I think La Casa does an amazing thing, and I'm sitting across from one of the founders. I had no idea of this. So let's talk about some of the initiatives that you took, some of the programs that you started, some of the resistance you encountered, and were you able to generate a lot of support right off the bat? Were people able to see your perspective, or was it very difficult?
Very difficult. I went around and I spoke at any kind of a gathering I could get in front of, and kept saying, we have abuse. We have to do something about it in our community, and we need support from the community to do this. I'm not a big fan of grants and government help. I think if a community wants it, they'll support it. Anyway, I always got, there's no abuse in this county. What are you talking about? Well, I could hear my parents talking. You're not abused. What are you talking about? He loves you. No. Same kind of thing. But then if you'd ask people, do you know of anybody who has been physically assaulted in your immediate family? There was always hands raised. Do you know of anybody in your immediate neighborhood that's been raped or treated badly? Hands would go up. So that was your statistics. And sometimes I would take stories from police reports and let them know that this is the kind of thing that happens here. So, yeah, I got a lot of resistance. I got a lot of resistance bringing in treatment courts. The sobriety court has been there for a long time. I mean, everybody has an alcohol issue, and apparently that is something that people think that they can support. But when you start talking about mentally ill people, putting them back in society and not keeping them locked up, people become very afraid. Mitzi, come here.
She's like, I'm telling you, there's people out there. I'm telling you, Mom.
Mitzi.
Come here, girl.
Mitzi.
Come here.
Hey,
Come here.
it's okay.
Come here.
I see that you're afraid. Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. It's all
It's
right,
okay.
girl.
Anyway,
You were saying that people become afraid to take mentally ill people and put them back in society.
Sure.
Because especially people are always afraid of the unknown. So
Right.
the mind is a wild thing. So you get these things that a lot of people don't understand or they can't relate to.
Right.
And then you're suggesting we need to rehabilitate these people and put them back out. And their fears are going, no, that's not good. Versus you're saying, like, that's a human being. That could be your brother. That could be your mother. That could be your son.
All of that. And, you see it even now. I mean, police for a long time were not trained in how to handle somebody who was mentally ill. And they still have problems with it, as we know by looking at the George Floyd case. But doesn't mean you shouldn't try. There are people that can be rehabilitated, and I've had a lot of them that went through mental health court that got their lives together. I still get cards and letters from some of them who have got good jobs now and had a horrible story. And the same with the vets. Saving somebody from committing suicide, I think, is a pretty good thing to do. But you get called a tree hugger, and you are probably light on crime. You don't put enough people in jail. Well,
You almost need to ask yourself the question, though, is the goal to put people in prison, or is the goal, if we can save this person from being down that road, if we can, we don't know what the statistic is for how many people we can save,
No.
but if there's a chance, isn't that worth doing? You need to, you know what I mean? Because, like,
and
to
that's what the conversation was, and it began to then be shown through statistics that people who go through these specialty courts, who get the treatment, who get special time with counselors and other programs that are out there, and the court system works with these like a wraparound program. You're supporting the individual from different ways. You're going to find that there is very much a reduction in recidivism. And so now those courts are paying for themselves and saving tax dollars for all of us. You know, why would you support a psychotropic drug being handed out in the jail and costing taxpayers all this money when they could be helped elsewhere? We need to do something about that, though, because there aren't a lot of places you can put people. And there are those that need to be there because they have gone too far and they can't change the way they are. You know, I don't think my son will be any different because he doesn't want to change. You know, can't live their life for them.
For sure.
You can only show them a different way.
And it's crazy that the mind can be such a beautiful, wonderful thing, or such a dark, terrible thing. I mean, it does have to come from within. Some people, the people that we're discussing right now, are people that need guidance, that need help,
Right.
that might need the resources, that might need the information. Whether it's veterans getting in touch with people that can give them that sense of brotherhood again, or just someone to love them, to be like, hey, let's fight through this thing together so you're not another number on a piece of paper.
And you're
it's-
not alone.
100%.
Not alone.
Something about knowing that other people are going through the same struggle and you guys are going to like get through it together. That is such a powerful thing. The feeling of emptiness or being alone or being helpless, like I got very close to being suicidal after my mother and some other incidents that happened. Not very close to being suicidal. I was extremely suicidal. And I'm glad I'm still here today. But the feeling of being alone and helpless are by far the worst thing. When you don't know what to do, where to
Right.
look, how to make the feelings and pain go away, that's where your brain can go like, well, maybe this solution would make it go away. Maybe this, you know what I mean? It'd be easier for it to just stop than to try to battle through this unknown to even know if I can get to the other side.
That's true. Saw a lot of that with the vets, and we had one that committed suicide. Didn't matter what we did, that's what he was going to do. He had his mind set on it because he knew it would never be any better. A closed head injury. And, you know, you do all you can to let them know that you still can have a life if you want it. But you still have to let go when they make that decision. It's not your fault that they did that. And that's hard for family members to accept, I think. But anyway.
And as someone, like I said, I lost my mother to suicide, and
Yeah.
my mother struggled a lot with mental health issues. I'm someone that is like, what if my mom could have got the treatment that she needed, or the right people, or some love and compassion? Because like the stories I hear from my father is like, especially back then, and this was, in the 90s,
Sure.
the way that mental health patients were treated was absolutely terrible, what I mean? Because they just didn't understand.
Sure.
So as a healthy society that's trying to move in a better direction, the more that we can have compassion and be like, hey, what can we learn from? What studies are out there? What events? What health courts have been set up, mental health courts have been set up that have shown results that say if you get these people what they need, or even put them on a better track, even if you could only help 30%, 40, whatever that number is, it's worth doing, because that's someone's mom.
That's right.
That's somebody's
But
grandma.
you have to have the dialogue first. People aren't willing to talk about it. When I ran for judge, I got told by a lot of different people, don't tell anybody you have a mentally ill son. Well, why? It's my life, it's my story, it's part of what makes me who I am. And he can't make the decision. It happened to him, that's all. So I never went along with that.
There's that foundation. You just had it. You've had this in your chest. Like, I'll tell everybody I have if they ask, because that is my life and my story. I'm not ashamed of it.
No.
You know what I mean? I think that's why you're willing to like stand in the spotlight and I'm going to change things, because you're not afraid for someone to look at you and be like, oh, what if they find out this? You're like, so what? Let them find out. I'm still doing it anyway. There's a power in there. And a lot of people, especially if you're someone that's struggling to like find your place in the world, you got to find that power within yourself. You got to find the ability, like, because people are going to doubt you. People are going to tell you
Sure.
you can't do things. And you got to just be like, no, I'm going to do it. So what has made you have such a strong connection with the veteran community? Because like I said, that's how we met initially. And you have a ton of empathy and understanding for these veterans. So there must be some experience in your life or some part of your story that, or were you just seeing veterans often in your court and you're like, man, like this is another group that needs the same help as the mental health group?
They weren't identified for a long time. I think we didn't begin to identify veterans, and I must have been on the bench 5 years before we started doing that. But why did I get involved with it? I don't know. It just happened. God gives you these things, and you decide what to do with it. I am married to a Marine, drill sergeant.
Drill sergeant. Oh my gosh, that is the
Sniper.
Oh wow.
That was his background. He got shot 3 times in Vietnam, lived through it, had his buddy die by his side by having his throat cut. So he came close to being blind forever and got pulled through that. So I never really knew much about that until that relationship. And then he became a cop, which is, again, all control issues, and mother that was alcoholic, father who died at 45, all of those kinds of pain-related things. Again, why did it come into my life? I don't know. I guess I'm just a magnet. But, yeah, so we've made it through 39 years, and it has been off and on, I will tell you. It has not been easy for either of us, because I'm stubborn, and that's probably why I do the things I do. But he has his stance, too. I mean, you don't become a drill sergeant and have that kind of control as a police officer without having control. So those are issues that it's hard to work through, but you do. And you still run into that with other people. There's always going to be somebody who wants to push you around. You have to learn how to deal with it.
And police right now are going through this really strange attack period. Like it's been a job that sometimes throughout society, like I remember when I was growing up, like I wanted to be a police officer at some point when I was a little kid. Like I remember we kind of looked up to police.
Yes.
We looked up to police. We looked up to firemen. We
Yes.
looked up to teachers. We were very thankful for those
Yes.
people
Right.
because we looked at it as like they're doing a very difficult job. If anyone's going to interact with a criminal that is likely to kill them, it is most likely the police that are going to run into those people.
It's
you know?
true.
So and they're willingly showing up to a place and going out and trying to better the society, and putting their lives on the line. But now we have this weird shift that has taken place, especially recently. Like there's an acronym that was floating around, ACAB, all cops are bastards. And people were promoting this ideology. And then it was defund the police. And then the Minneapolis Police Department was burnt to the ground, and there were people celebrating. And I'm like, where did we shift from, like, you know, the young kid being like, I'd like to be a police officer when I grow up? Because what do police officers do? They help people. Like, that is the world I grew up in. It's like, that's
Me too.
Now, and don't get me wrong, like you said, there's bad apples in every bunch. Police brutality is a horrific thing, and we need to try to stop it in any way possible. We need to get the best training and education in these people. We need to make sure they have mental health services, because imagine being in a career where you're seeing, like, the worst part of people on a regular basis.
Well, you have to make sure that they're in law enforcement for the right reason. If you're not.
That is a huge point, that on the initial entry into the police academy or on the program, you almost have to really evaluate those clients, because, or those people, because if you're bringing the wrong type of people that want to hurt people, that are filled with anger and, like, you know, authority issues because of maybe something in their past, that want to go out and now abuse the population, strip people of their rights, do all the things that that they're sworn to protect, then it's like you're asking for serious problems.
But can you imagine what a situation that is anytime they get a call? They have to be able to make split decisions that are going to be later picked apart by attorneys and judges and everybody else. And, you know, that show Cops was always a great one. You know, when I was going through law school, my husband would have us watch that together, and he'd stop it and he'd say, is this going to be a good search or not? You know, but that's what you think of. And once I got on the bench, I said, you know, those cops have got the worst job, because they have to make those split decisions, and I have to be kind to them, because they could be out there protecting me. And what has happened with the defunding, I don't think they really wanted to take the money away. They wanted to put social workers in the police departments, which I think is a good idea.
I think it's a good idea too. I mean, if you, like you said, if you were trying to deal with mentally ill people or things like that, and you have a police officer that is just not trained for that setting at all, you're more likely for things to escalate into a serious problem.
And you see that in the courtrooms too. Prosecutors always said to me, why do they thank you when they're going to jail, instead of throwing a fit like they do in some of these other courts? I said, it's all in the delivery. You know, I'm not shaming them. I'm not telling they're bad people. One of the things I used to say to some of them who were habitually getting into trouble, when did you decide you wanted to go to jail? Tell me that.
Wow. That is a question that anybody on
and
the
they
wrong...
look and they go, what are you talking about? I said, well,
you're on a crash course with jail.
You got convicted of a crime. You were on probation. You were told you're not going to jail now, but if you get your probation violated, you're going to jail. So when you went out and used, what went through your mind? Did you think, I'm going to get away with it, so I don't have to worry about it? That's when you decided you were going to go to jail. I don't put people in jail. You put yourself there.
That right there is a powerful line. Listen, can you imagine, and you know what that is? Personal responsibility. Instead of looking at the judge across the bench from you and being like, this person is the reason I'm going to jail, or this lawyer, or this, or the police officer that caught me. What if you looked in the mirror and said, the reason I'm going to jail is because of the way I'm living my life? You know what I mean?
It does make them stop and think.
It's brilliant. It really is brilliant. When did you decide you wanted to go to jail? Because you would think the answer 99% of the time with people would be like, I don't want to go to jail. Well, then, if that is a true statement and you analyze your actions, where is the breakdown? Where do you not see that this path leads to this result?
Right.
100%. And obviously, I've never been to jail, and I can't imagine being locked in a certain area, stripped of your ability to be a human being in society. I mean, it's like you're like a caged animal. Imagine having a beautiful pasture and you're stuck caged in a spot. And I can't believe that doesn't create more mental issues and like people. I mean, I'm sure that jail culture is probably terrible. I know nothing about the inside of it. But when you cage somebody and you strip them from being a human being because of their actions, I mean, they put themselves there. But it's got to be a really difficult process for the human psyche to, be able to go through. And then how do you expect them to come out and be normal citizens again after being a caged animal? It's almost like they won't know how to act again. But like you said, there are some people that unfortunately need to go to jail. And nowadays, like one of my best friends growing up, he's my cousin. He's a Philadelphia police officer. And he said there's a huge problem going on now where they're like not convicting people when they are repeat offenders over and over and over and over till they finally murder people. He's like, until they finally have killed a bunch of people and then they get put away. He's like, but we have a case list this long on these people where they've been just let off, charges dropped. Mm-hmm. And then next thing, they're killing people. And he's like, there's got to be an in-between. Jail is going to be a result for some people.
And no judge has a crystal ball. You just do the best you can, and you're taking into account what that person is presenting to you. If you let somebody talk long enough, they'll tell you what the problem is. Becomes pretty crystal clear. So then you can hone in on that and say, how about if we get you some help for that? What can I do to help you do something different? And sometimes that's the only time they've ever heard somebody say that to them. What do you mean, you're going to help me? Yeah.
Just having that little bit of love. You know what that is? That is from a spirit of love and compassion, showing someone else that, like, hey, I would rather see you on your feet again, being happy, being a contributing member of this society, than going to that cell over there and wondering what your kid's going to do without a father in their life. And now who is that kid going to grow up to be? You know what I mean? When now all of a sudden their dad was in jail and mom was...
On the other side of that coin is people who will bring their children to court to keep from going to jail. They're going to put their kids in between.
No.
Well, I'd say... guess they're going to have to go to protective services because it's not going to keep you from going to jail. And you should be thinking about these kids before you did what you did.
100%. So in your time as a judge, when you first became a judge and then over the years, first of all, was it difficult when you first got up there and like you're now deciding the fates of these people? Or like one thing I've always never really had trouble with is like I know who I am to a core and I have strong belief in myself so like when I'm going to make a decision, there's not a lot of indecision in my mind. There's not a lot of like, well, I need to question myself. It's like when you know who you are and I have a strong sense of morality, I know right from wrong, I've made mistakes and learned from them. So like it's kind of easy for me to make decisions. But I couldn't imagine being now in this new role, like when you first became judge, like you ran, you won, and now all of a sudden like you are the final say in the fates of these people. Was that difficult at first? And then over time being a judge, like is there anything that you would tell people on the outside, what it was actually like, to be a judge?
First of all, I never had the last say. I always used to say to people, if you don't like what I'm doing, you can appeal me. Let somebody else review what I did. And I never had a problem changing my mind if I made a decision and found out some other information that changed the way that I made the decision. I didn't see that as a weakness.
You weren't a tyrant up there. You were a human being still. You were still going... We keep getting back to that, Carol. No matter what, you were being a human being first and a judge second versus some people probably are judge, tyrant first, human being much further behind.
Yeah, probably.
Some people. I'm only talking about bad apples because a lot of people, that are attacking the way things are right now are citing the extreme examples and the abuse of power and things like that as a bad thing. But you were a human being first.
Tried to be. Humanity comes before anything else. And it's pretty easy to see in a judge, by the way they treat people in the courtroom, what their feelings are. I've always believed in dogs, comfort dogs. I brought comfort dogs into the vets, and that was controversial. Oh, you can't have a dog in the courtroom. Well, yeah, you can. And I used to bring my 2 dachshunds in and turn them loose in the clerk's office, and the morale went up.
You know what? You're just willing to change things. I love that you just said there on the podcast, you said, well, you can't have dogs in court. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, why can't you?
Why? You're willing to change things for the better, as long as you know that, like, hey, I'm trying to make things better.
But I never look at it as making it better. I just look at an opportunity to present it, and let's see if it flies. I mean, I don't know any better than anybody else. I'm just trying to make things work and, trying to get to what is bringing people before me. I don't want to see people there. I used to tell them, wave at me at the grocery store. Don't come back here. So
now, like I said, you've had a long career. You've seen changes over time. We are getting better as a society at addressing a lot of these things. Thank God. That's wonderful to see. At this point in your life, what are your current roles within our community for the people that don't know? Like, I know you're on the board, and let's talk about that, like what your current roles are. And if you could still have any goals, like things that you want to see take place, let's talk about those.
Well, maybe I should tell you, I didn't want to get off the bench. I fought quite hard to stay on it, including running against another judge, which was probably not a good idea. But I always looked at it as it's a CEO position. Let the public decide who you want. They did. It wasn't me. Okay. But tried to get the age limit changed because I don't think it's right.
So you were only out because of your
Age.
That's ridiculous. Unless you were showing, unless there was clear signs where you were inept to be able to do the job anymore, honestly, I would rather have someone with way more experience, someone who's seen things change over time, someone who has a good record. Why wouldn't you, like in novels and stuff, we always talk about, like, elders have the wisdom and the information, and they've seen things. Why would that be a factor?
I ask that question quite often. And I thought I did some things that improved people's lives, and I wanted to continue doing that. It was the best job I ever had, and I thought I did a lot to help people. It wasn't to be a judge. It wasn't to have that black robe. I would never ask anybody to do something I wouldn't do myself, so it wasn't that. But having that taken away from you when you're not ready is like coming home from a war. It is a big loss. And I got very suicidal myself.
It's funny that you, well, not funny, it's crazy that you say that, because in so many of these episodes, the part of life that people struggle the most is in transition phases. Is like Eric Hipple came on here and told about when he left the NFL and he was no longer a football player, how insanely difficult that was. And so many veterans talk about it's those, because we tie our identity to things, right? So
Sure you do.
That was your identity.
Yeah.
And now it's gone from you, and it's like, what's my purpose? How do I make the impact? What do I do now?
It was very funny. The last day of vet court that I was going to do, the comfort dog came and sat by me.
The dog said, this woman needs me today.
You need to understand. I'm here for you for a reason. So yeah, it was a difficult time. Took me 6 months or more to get readjusted.
How did you pick yourself back up? Because, after a lifetime, and you were doing something that you said, I love, this is the job that I love the most, and you felt your ability to make an impact on the world around you, and that serves your purpose, right? When we have a purpose to make things better and you're able to do so, it's like you're fitting the pieces together. How did you finally pick yourself back up?
I listened to what happened in vet court. I realized that this isn't the end. This doesn't have to be the end. This is just another transition. You're going to do something else. Pick yourself up, stop feeling sorry for yourself, and get out there and do something.
The same lessons you were hearing other people being told, and we're promoting to people that are going through a really difficult transition. The information was actually sitting right across from you. You said, you know what? Maybe that's why this was there. That's why I fell into this position. And then that saves your life. That helps you get back on track.
Exactly. I always, I never was afraid to sit down with somebody who was going through a mental episode, maybe because of my son. But I never tried to escalate where they were, just listen to them. And I did the same thing with the vets. I always sat down at a table like this with them. And deputies weren't real thrilled that I was doing that because they thought I was going to get attacked at some point. But I never felt that way. And you have a gut feeling when you know you're not in a safe place. So I trust that. But yeah, that's how I got myself out of it. And so then I decided, what else can I do? And I liked the mediation. Just wasn't getting enough of it because of COVID. So I decided, my commissioner's not going to run again. So I'm going to put my name out there, and I'd like to be on the Board of Commissioners. Different way of looking at the county. Still keeps me in the loop, and I still have some way of making a difference. So I ran, and the rest is history. Now I'm on the Board of Commissioners.
So would you say you have any other goals that are big things that you'd still like to accomplish? Can you fight to get the age changed at this point for a judge, or did you let that chapter close? I
let that go. I am still very passionate in trying to get the mentally ill taken care of in a different way. We give directives to relatives that when we get to a point where we can't make decisions, they have the power to put us where we need to be for treatment. You can't do that with somebody who's mentally ill, and you should be able to. If they are of sound mind and they can make that decision, then give that person the authority to give it to someone else in their family or whoever they want to do it. And then when they go crazy, acting, that person can come in and help and put them in and get treatment. But the way it is now, and I understand why it is the way it is now, because people used to get committed for a long time and it wasn't good. But that isn't the case now. Now we need places to put people to get them well. And then they can come back. Because mental illness isn't something that happens all the time. People go through phases of being sick, just like anything else. So,
and the way that you establish La Casa for people of abuse, why couldn't there be programs right in Livingston County that if we have mentally ill people, we have a way to help them? Why can't that exist? Why wouldn't that exist in every civilized culture? You know what I mean? Because mental illness is something, in my opinion, that you're born with. I mean, obviously trauma can lead to mental illness, but a lot of people, I mean, their brain chemistry could just be incorrect. Their serotonin levels could be way off. We need to look at those people still as just the people, as fathers, brothers. Those are members of our community. And if we don't have a system that we can help these people get back on track, they're doomed for failure. I mean, we're abandoning them. And remember what I said earlier, is like that helpless feeling or being alone are the two worst feelings in the world. Even just knowing somebody loves you and cares about you and wants to see you do well can be such motivation.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I'd like to see a regional center where prisoners who are mentally ill can go there and have medical staff run the place. Have guards? Absolutely. But the main thing is the treatment and getting the medical things done.
So how do we do this? How do we get people fired up? I mean, because a lot of people now are talking about this more than ever. People are talking about mental illness. They're talking about all these different topics that used to be like very controversial, just not spoken of. So how do we get people to go, we're doing this, we want to do this? Is it just spreading awareness, or is there something bigger than that?
It's spreading awareness, and of course, where do you get the money from? It starts like anything else. It has to be a grassroots situation, just like vet life. It's the same kind of thing. You have to get then on up the ladder with the stakeholders to convince them, just like I did, to convince the judges that this way of court is better. You have to have a plan. Where you're going to get a building, who's going to, run it, how are you going to pay for all of this stuff? And it's not something that happens overnight. You might have a 10-year plan, but you have to get those that are dealing with these people on board. So yeah, it's getting the information out, it's having special meetings. What can we do about this problem? So yeah,
probably
it can be
comes
done
down to simplicity, like having dialogues like you are right now and just spreading awareness. And anyone that listens to this episode, they're going to be thinking about these things. They're going to be thinking about, what if that was my brother? What if that was my son? What if that was my father, my mother? Or even, just a stranger, but that is someone else's brother or mother. So having these conversations and trying to move the needle in the right direction is a step towards a better future, one where people are taken care of more often.
Yeah, and I understand how difficult it is when somebody's in a psychic break for example. I've had my son go through it 4 or 5 times and not wanting to accept treatment. And especially when I was in judge, he'd come into the courtroom or try to get to me, and then I would have the police come, and I watched them take him down on the ground, 4 or 5 of them, because you get so strong. And not easy to watch, being a mom. But you understand that's the only thing that you have now to get help. Well then, at that time, the prosecutor's office was issuing charges for resisting and obstructing on an individual who was not in the right mind. I thought that was wrong. So, worked a little bit on that. I don't think they're doing that as much.
Well, I think getting to intent is incredibly important. I think that's what you're alluding to right there, is you got to see the intent of that person. Is that person intentionally trying to break the law to be a criminal, or is that person mentally ill that is, just not understanding how they're
resisting? They're resisting the treatment. They're not necessarily resisting God, but puts the police officer in a horrible position. Well, how much force can they use? And when is it that somebody says it's not reasonable anymore? George Floyd case, same kind of thing. So, people make mistakes. A lot of them aren't trained well enough to handle situations like that. I don't think I was trained well enough to handle the situations I was faced with, but I tried really hard to educate myself and to deal with professionals that were, educated in the field to help guide me to know what to do. And I think that's all we can do. But there are a lot of people out there that feel the same way I do, that they want to have a different place for folks. My son is high functioning, so he doesn't qualify for a foster situation, or it's not called foster home, but a place like that. He'd walk away from it in a minute, and he wouldn't take his meds. Won't obey the rules. So there's some basic things that have to happen. But to just put them in the jail with everybody else and try to treat them that way gets really dicey quick, and they put them in rubber suits. And I used to have them arraigned in rubber suits. So now we have, at least now there is intervention from community mental health. They go over, they assess, they get treatment right away. I used to make it so that if you want to take them to the hospital, I'll change the bond so you can transport them. If they're not accepted, you come back and I'll change the bond back and they'll go back to jail. But if they can go, then they go to the hospital instead. There are things like that that can happen, but very controversial, as we say, because you're dealing with a person that could go out and hurt someone. So I always took the risk. Didn't get burned, but every time I did it, I knew it was a possibility.
That's the same woman that would sit across the table from people that everyone was telling you this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And you were trying to see the humanity first. You were trying to see the intent first. And when you sit down with that person, you show them a little bit of care. Maybe you don't see the ugly side of them. Is it possible? Yeah. But we should risk things in certain situations to try to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's right. A part of the spirit that I feel like we should all have as people. You could get hurt, but what if you don't try to help people? What do? Live your life that cynical? They're like, oh, I'm just not going to go for anything because this could happen. No, you still need to give your best. Yeah. So
I had a philosophy: bless the beast and the children, for in this world they have no choice, they have no voice. I believe that. So if you came into my court and you had beaten up a dog or tried to drown a cat, you got jail. No two ways about it. There's no excuse for any of that. If you rape a child and it's proven that you've raped the child, you're launched. So there is a time to get tough. There is a time to have hard jail sentences. But there are a lot of other times, maybe 85, 90% of the time, when that's not the cure.
What the first things you spoke about, you have to be an evil person to do things like that. I don't think, and maybe there are extreme cases of mental illness where they're so detached from reality they do some dark things.
There are.
I'm sure there are. But overall, there's just lines in society. Then once you're willing to cross a line like that, like, you just don't have a place in a civilized society, unfortunately. And it's got to be hard to make those distinctions, especially, you can't let compassion take you down the wrong road, where, like I said, in Philadelphia, they're nonstop not putting people that are doing
Right.
terrible things in jail.
Yeah.
And now those
California,
people
too.
go out and murder people.
Yeah, California's the same way. How can you walk into a store and clean off the shelves and not be arrested? We don't want to have a country that way.
Yeah, you can't be such a bleeding heart that you're saying no people should ever be punished for their actions ever, because that is not true. Any of the incidents that you talked about up front, I believe any good citizen would be 100% on board with, like, there needs to be extreme punishment for those things. There's not like, oh, well, you came from a tough background. If you can't differentiate the difference, between doing a dark, horrific act like that and I shouldn't do that, then at a base level, you are deeply wrong. Like, you're just so disconnected from being a human being that, unfortunately, that's a cage is your answer. You're lucky we don't have the death penalty anymore, because if you, like, did a thing to a child like that, I wouldn't even be opposed to those things, because it's just such a dark level. Now you're going to keep this person. That is a danger to other people. That's the person that might go to jail and butcher some of the other people. You don't know. So sometimes I think we do need to have an iron fist about certain things.
I do too.
Versus in certain, like you said, certain parts of society right now, we're so like, just, it's all because of trauma and all because, well, sorry, you know
That's
what I mean?
right.
Because that's someone's child, that's somebody's animal, that's somebody, yeah, 100%. I think it's very clear that we set that distinction, that people don't listen to this podcast and say, oh, they just want, just sunshine and rainbows for everybody. That is not the case.
It's not the case. I live it because I don't help my son anymore. I helped him for 35 years and it didn't do any good. So now he is out there, he calls me, I send him clothes if he asks for it, but he has money that he gets from Social Security for disability. I'm not giving it to him anymore myself. He's old enough that he has to learn how to live without me. And it's like I told him, I said, there's all these programs out there. If you would just obey the rules, you could have a better life. And you're choosing not to, so.
It is pretty wild, the brain. We're all people. And that some people will go through this existence just nonstop, breaking every rule, all the problems, refuse to get help, and refuse to really get to a state of happiness that they deserve as people. It's like, and that's all you want to see. You're like, all I want for you is to see happiness in you and fulfillment in your life, and like letting go of the damage and the mistakes and
That's
like
right.
getting your stuff together. But yet some brains are just determined to experience a side of life that like people would like us we'd do everything in our power not to experience that life, because this other life exists, but I guess that's one of the fascinating parts of this creation is like, no matter how bad you want it for someone else, they have to want it for themselves as well.
I think we started with that.
I believe so as well. Well, Carol, if there's anything else that you'd like to capture on this moment in time to have forever, like anything you'd like to say about society, about your time as a judge, about what you've seen in people, about a message that you would say to the world, literally anything, we'll capture that last little bit on the podcast, and then we'll wrap this thing up. We have gone for an hour and 15 minutes, effortlessly. It's almost a feature film at this point. But just anything you'd like to capture, and then, we'll wrap this podcast up.
Well, I think we're all pretty remarkable people. But I don't see myself as being anything but a common person who has run into problems and tried to make as much lemonade out of lemons as I could. And I continue to do that. I probably will, because it's just kind of in my bones. So, yeah.
Well, awesome. Truly, it was an honor having you on the podcast today. Your story is incredible. We need more people like that in the world. We need to set these examples for future generations, and hopefully more people just, if we can reconnect with the basic principles about like take personal responsibility, learn to be the best version of yourself, and then by doing that, go serve others so that they can bring out the best, we're going to live in a more beautiful world. So it was an honor sitting with you today. I knew, like I said, from the time I spoke at Veterans Court and you quoted Imagine by John Lennon, I was standing right next to you. I was in a suit. I could probably find the picture when I post this podcast. And I was like, man, like those are the type of leaders that I would gladly follow and gladly support, versus a lot of leaders grab authority and then, they disconnect from that humanity side. And then like,
it's all about them and their way.
100%. And then it makes you lose faith in like the system, because you're like, man, we need the people to rise up.
And that's what I was hearing from you. You were losing faith in the system because of that. But there are people out there that aren't that way. We have to remember that too.
100%. And luckily, I avoid the system as much as humanly possible. I just try to stay on track. But it did. I remember, especially in my early 20s, about 10 years ago, I lost a lot of faith in the system, because I was just like, man, it just shouldn't be the way that it is. But I was definitely looking at the examples that, I was looking at the bad apples of the bunch and not focusing on how many good people are out there trying to move things in the right direction.
And look at what you're doing now.
100%.
You're giving back.
Yep. And that's one of the big things I've learned is most people that come from depression or that have struggled or that have pain in their life, when they get their lives together, when they transform, they want to see other people do it too, because life is just so much better. Like I want to hear about amazing stories and places you've been and beauty and happiness in life.
Yeah.
And we can do that by bringing each other up.
Yeah. It's like I've said, when I get to the end of my rope, whenever that is, I don't want to say I had regrets. Probably will have some, but for the most part, I want to be able to say I tried. I tried what I could do to help everybody around me. It's not about me. It's about, what does humanity need? How can we make our world better? How can we have that John Lennon song, Live It? We get to that stage, we will have accomplished a lot as a human race. So
100%. And
I have hope.
I guess there's one final thing I want to say is just, you just said like regrets, and a lot of people worry about that. They think like, man, I don't want to look back and regret. At your life, you've lived through many, many decades. You've seen life change. You've witnessed the technological revolution. You've witnessed, society is probably so different now than what it was then. And I'm sure it's a lot better in some ways, and it's probably worse in some ways.
Well, I didn't see the horse and buggy go away. I'm not quite that old yet.
Not quite. But yeah, there's Amish people. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and if you drive through western Pennsylvania, you will still see the horse and buggy going down the road. But is there, if you could tell the 16-year-old kid right now, that's struggling, that's trying to find their place in the world, that's trying to, they just want to believe that the future is bright. If you could give them any advice from somebody that has really lived through chasing your goals and, I'm going to become a lawyer now, I'm going to become a judge now, what advice would you give a young kid in this generation?
Well, I think you all at that age are soul searching. What am I going to do with my life? What interests me? What doesn't? And I say, try everything. Find out what your passion is. You may not even realize what your passion is. But once you realize what makes you feel good, believe in yourself. You can do anything.
And chase that feeling, 100%. If you ever get that spark in your chest or that fire in your heart or that calling of purpose that pulls you into the future, you got to chase that. You got to follow that. Wherever it may lead you, you got to follow that spark, and then, you can create a life that you're very proud of. So, Carol, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll wrap this podcast up.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.